Hello, everyone. Welcome to day four. And in the Scrum preparation journey, we have gone through the Agile, the Scrum, and the different kind of models in the software development and the SDLC, and other things in the previous classes. And today we have few more important core concepts on the Scrum front. And let's begin. Let me share my screen. Okay, so we have seen the different kind of scrum ceremonies in the previous class, and right now we have a fair idea how these scrum ceremonies are conducted and what exactly is the important factor which decides the project progress or the software development progress is mainly the user stories, and these user stories are very important in order to understand what feature is getting developed and how the product owner gets the requirements to the team, and the team understands what is to be built, and with what accuracy we are able to deliver what is committed is based on the good user stories. So when we say user stories, it is like we have four different asks, like who wants something, what is that they want, why do they want it, what value the feature gives to the user. So, for example, as a customer, I want to reset my password so that I can access my account when I have forgotten the password. So, okay, this user story is fairly on something like, okay, we have delivered a project, or we are trying to deliver a project, and somewhere in that we have a login page, and a customer or a user, the normal tendency these days is to forget the password, because we have a lot of passwords, different kind of passwords across different systems. So in case if I happen to forget my password, what is that, I can do in order to retrieve my password or change the password. So if this is a user story of, or if this is a feature which is to be developed, then considering this user story, we will have some of the acceptance criteria, like, okay, the user is able to access his email ID, in that case, the registered email ID, or the registered whatever phone number which is used. So once the registered email ID or the phone number is used, the reset password link will be sent across to the the email ID, or reset passcode will be sent to the mobile number, in case if it's a mobile number. And once they go and click on that link, they will be transferred to the page where they can change the password, or using that passkey over the mobile number, they are able to change the password. Once the reset is done, they have to come back to the login page and log in with the new password. So this feature will have these many kind of the tasks which they need to develop. The developers have to develop this user story by splitting it into various aspects which is required for that particular user story. So writing good user stories is a very important, very important task, and this is mainly or mostly done by the POs in the organization. And the basic acceptance criteria are also written before projecting it to the team in order to evaluate if the user story is good. So a good user story is always based on the invest criteria. So this invest criteria is nothing but I stands for independent, N for negotiable, V for valuable, E for estimable, S is small, and T is testable. So whenever we are considering the user story, it's important to consider the invest criteria. When we say independent, if we are trying to develop that particular user story, it should not be directly dependent on any of the other user stories, or the interdependencies between user stories should be nil. If not nil, then at least minimal. It's not like, okay, we can try to develop this, but we want a requirement from something else. So that should not be the case. Even though if there is a requirement of being dependent between the user stories, they should be developed separately. And once they are developed separately, then we can go ahead and merge. Suppose, for example, in the earlier slide, we saw that we are trying to develop a forgot password reset or the password reset page kind of user story. Now, for that, we'll have requirements that we need to, club the data within the database. So the kind of connection or the interconnection between the web pages, or moving from one page to another, or trying to get the details from the registered email ID and coming back to this page. So those kind of navigations can be connected later, that we are not considering as the major dependencies. So user story is independent. We are trying to develop it separately. But however, if there is some kind of dependencies in between the tasks are there, that can be done later on, and that should be minimal. Negotiable. When we say negotiable, it should be like, okay, if we are trying to give a reset password link, okay, we are not keeping it very strict, like, okay, it should be given only to the registered email ID. Suppose the person is not able to use that mail ID, or it's been many years and he has lost the access to that mail ID, then what is the further step? He can try to use his registered mobile number and try to get the passcode, the other option which I said. Or if there is something else which the client needs, okay, the user story which you have said is okay, but we want some more enhanced things in that. Or maybe we want a two-step verification, because there is a lot of chance of somebody else is trying to get the access of the particular person by portraying it to be him. So that's the reason he has forgotten the password. In that case, what is the security checks? If it is a two-step verification, like you have to enter a code from the email, code from the mobile, so, or some kind of other, password checks or some questionnaires which we have answered in the beginning in order to verify it is us, or in order to verify we are not a robot, so that we try to avoid this AI interfere or some kind of scammers interference and all. So, based on the requirement, we should be able to accommodate within that user story. So, it should be negotiable and it should be valuable. Whenever we are considering it's a user story, it should add a value to a particular aspect. So if we are trying to develop a user story, it should not be like, okay, it can add value or it cannot add value. No, it should add a value. So there are some kind of tasks, like if we are considering some kind of regression testing within the user story, then the concept is like it can be included, it may not be included. If those kind of tasks are there, that task is still fine. But the user story as a whole should add some value to the feature. Okay, this user story is like, if without this user story, we are not able to complete that feature, something like that. So the value addition is very important, estimable. So if at all, if this is a user story, the developer should be able to provide an estimation how long it would be required to complete the tasks under this user story. Suppose a user story has around like six acceptance criteria, and they have added six tasks in order to complete this acceptance criteria. Then in that case, they should be able to provide the physical numbers, like, okay, the first task requires 4 hours, the second task requires 5 hours, something like that, and it should be estimable. So overall, as a whole, okay, this user story can be developed within 3 days of 6 hours capacity by an individual. One single person can develop within 3 days. That is like 18 hours. Something like that should be like estimable. Coming to small, so keeping the user story small is very important, because the more bigger it becomes logically, and the design wise also, it becomes very complex, and lot of issues will come in between, and a lot of time will get invested or wasted rather, in order to figure out how to solve that, because of the lot of interconnection dependencies and other things. So more we keep it as independent and small, it becomes easier for the team to develop it easily, and the integrations and merging can happen in the further steps. Testable. So any user story to be considered a good user story, it should be testable. So there are some kind of user stories which may not be testable. There will be some tags like, okay, you need not have to test it. These user stories are something like Okay, it is just like, a check from the developer side. If, okay, this we have already developed, and we are just trying to merge this into a particular environment. So, okay, I have developed it into my local environment. I'm going to deploy it into the major server, or where the business can have the access to. So that does not require testing, because it is just going and merging the code into that tool, and directly the business can see, or if they can't see, they'll just get back. So there's no testing needed as such. So there are kind of those user stories which are not testable, but considering a good user story should always be testable. And a good user story will be mostly the part of a feature which we are developing as a project. So the kind of not testable user stories which I said could be just, a convenient way of progressing within the team in order for the team management. But a good user story which is testable is always a part of the feature which is getting deployed, which gets deployed into the client systems, or the client would be able, or any other person would be able to use it physically, like, they're able to see that environment and go ahead and use that environment by themselves. So this invest criteria will define a good user story. So this is one of the important aspect. Now coming to the acceptance criteria. Every user story must have the acceptance criteria. Acceptance criteria is nothing but the conditions that must be met for the user story to be considered done. So okay, there should be a some point. How do we know that a user story is completely completed with all the required features? I know, like, when a developer tries to, estimate the user stories, they go ahead and add the tasks with estimations and all. Once all the tasks are completed, they go ahead and put the user story for testing as result, or they'll just close the user story. But this, as a part of the business, or in the point of view of a POBA or a business, like, there are some conditions which are written as acceptance criteria. So these acceptance criteria should be met, and once, if, like, the usually we consider 3 to 8 ideal acceptance criteria under one single user story. And if suppose, for example, there are 6 acceptance criteria for one of the user story, once only all the 6 acceptance criteria are met, we can consider that the user story is completed. For example, okay, the reset password. User can receive the email, user can change the password, new password works. So these kind of acceptance criteria are written. So, and these acceptance criteria are usually written with a kind of format. The format usually used is like given, when, then. For example, given I am logged in, when I click on my orders, then I see the order history. Okay. So I'm just using a website. I want to see my order history. So for that, to see that order history, first of all, I should have been logged in. Then only I would be able to access the website. Then I click on the My Orders. So when I click on the My Orders, then only we get navigated to see that, what is that I've ordered in the past. That is where the order history displays. So why the logging in is important? Because how will the system even know that whose order history it should display? So provided we have logged in, they know that, okay, I'm the customer and I have these details already stored in the database. And once I click on the order history or the my orders, I get my own database retrieved order history displayed on the screen. So given, when, then. So this is the general format for all of the kind of acceptance criteria which are written under the user story. This is a fairly general way of writing it. It can be modified, but better practice is to write in the given, when, then conditions kind. So 3 to 8 ideal acceptance criteria are written for one particular user story. And also, like, this is just a general rule. It's not like compulsory that it should be between 3 to 8. Ideal is 3 to 8. At least one is compulsory in order to consider the user story to be valid and has one acceptance criteria, so that we are able to determine if the user story is completed the right. So, okay, now we know that what is a user story, how invest criteria will define the user story to be good, and what is acceptance criteria, how it is written, and what kind of acceptance criteria is to be written, why is it important. Once it is done, how we consider that the user story is completed. Now we say that how PO and BA gather the requirements. So basically, PO and BA are the one stakeholders who get in the requirements and share the information between the business and the Scrum teams. And they basically talk to the users and the stakeholders in order to understand what are the requirements and how it is to be built. And they even go ahead and document these needs and as features or the user stories. So we do have some kind of backlogs which is maintained. It's not the sprint backlog, but there is a feature backlog or some backlog which is maintained by the PO or BA, wherein the documents are written as a features or user stories are already processed and kept. And at the right time, they are just pulled it into the sprints as and when needed. So once they have all of this, in the backlog, suppose we are considering three of the user stories from the backlog are to be pulled to the current sprint. So if the sprint is starting tomorrow or day after tomorrow and the planning is not yet completed, the PO or BA takes the accountability of pulling these user stories into the board, and they happen to have a discussion with the developers, like the developers in the QA, Scrum Master, and everyone. And they try to come into a common understanding that, okay, if this user story is good to develop, what are the acceptance criteria? They do explain it to the team and they come to a negotiation that if this can be done. So all of this happens during the refinement call. So this refinement call between the pre-planning call and the planning call, or it can be between the planning call and the actual execution. Refinement call can happen anytime. It is based on the team requirements. So basically, all the requirements are portrayed to the team during the pre-planning call. And once the team understands and tries to gather all the necessary details from their end and try to make a plan by adding the tasks and estimations. And once they give a heads off that okay, we are able to complete this within this time during the planning call, then only we go ahead and start the sprint. So basically, what happens is the developers and QA are given the opportunity in order to listen to the PO or BA when they are presenting with the requirements, and they get some time to assess from their end. Like how good are these to complete, how much time they do require to complete, and what happens is some of the organizations maintain something like the levels in the board, wherein suppose if a requirement is on the level 3 or level 4, it is somewhere like it is vague. There is some requirement from the business which is not refined and we do not know what is to be done, and gradually the PO or BA refines the user story and tries to put the acceptance criteria and everything and just puts it onto the board at the level 2. And the developers and the QA people will check their estimations and they see like how they'll figure out how they can complete this user story, has a discussion with the PO or BA based on the requirements and try to clear their doubts, and also check for the repositories and other things in order to get more idea how to develop these user stories. And they get it into the level 1 only on the day of the planning, when they are actually committing to complete this task within this time period, is when they go ahead and change it to the L0. L0 is something like, okay, it's in the production stage, and they close, I mean they change it to L0 and they start with the development process. So if you are seeing on the board, or somebody, anybody for that matter, looks to the board when it's in L0, they are quite clear that okay, everything is clear, the requirements are clear, the development has already started, and the commitment is already taken. So we can expect the results to be out within the completion of the sprint. So this is followed by some of the organizations, and it's actually a best practice because a lot of clarity is got with this kind of approach. And the next concept is the spike. So, what do we actually mean by spike? Spike is like a very important concept. So, why? Because when we are talking about the user stories, often what we observe is in a company's repository or the database, we often have some kind of already built in kind of codes which the developers use in order to build the new codes or build the new features based on what was done earlier. They'll have a framework or understanding how to build this, and based on that they'll build further. But if the team is wholly new, or they do not know what to do, how to do, where to start, etc., then at that point spike becomes like a very important concept or the aspect. So spike is nothing but short research work to reduce the uncertainty. Okay, so suppose for example, a team is trying to build a voice search feature. So this is a kind of feature the company has never built before. So the team is new, they do not know what to do. They just got a requirement that, okay, go ahead and build a voice search feature. And like, based on the voice, like, if the command is given through the voice, the search filter should work. So when they do not know what to do, they'll consider it as a spike. And there's a possibility that they can create a user story like research user story or design user story, wherein it is completely in the phase of trying to understand how to build this particular aspect. So the team is lacking the knowledge. So they'll research the best API options already available in the industry. Like for the voice search and suppose for example, if you're considering a Google API or Amazon API, which is already existent in the market, and a similar approach, like, they can just take and understand how this particular prototype works, how small is it, and will it fit the kind of environment which the team is developing. So it could be related to what kind of coding is done, or what is the requirement, how much is the capacity, what could be the search words or languages, or the synchronization time, how fast the voice has to be, understood and given with the details and other things. So they test some of the existent APIs like Google API and Amazon API. They find which one is faster and which one is cheaper. They understand the technical flow of it. So to get the technical flow, it could be like an open source software, or they might have to require for buying some of the things based on the requirement. And they can now estimate the actual user story correctly. So once they've got a reference kind of the prototype, then they will be able to figure out how we can do it within our system. Suppose, for example, we have a lot of AI tools like ChatGPT or Perplexity, etc. So, if an organization decides to have a virtual assistant for their own organization, then they will go ahead and see how the other open AIs are working and what is the prototype, which is faster and which is cheaper, and how much of the capacity or what kind of features is sufficient for the organization individuals to search or get the details within themselves, and not just run around across the teams or the people in order to get the details and understand the things. And then they go ahead and give a sign off for one particular prototype which they have finalized. So at this point, it becomes more clear, like, once we work on the spike or a research user story or a design user story, we are in a place wherein we have the requirements clear. So the user story is with the invest criteria and the acceptance criteria is written very clearly. So now the team is well aware as to what can be developed, how it can be developed, and all that. So this spike becomes like very important aspect, and this is usually taken into consideration mainly for the research, and this will be like the base based on which the other things will get developed. So once this is done, will have a kind of reference material. If any requirement in the future comes with the similar aspect, we are able to take it forward easily. So mainly the spikes are into two broad categories. One is a technical and one is a functional. So mostly on the technical aspects, it would be like, how to build. Suppose we know the requirements, but we don't know how to build it, what kind of software to use, do we have accessibility for that? And are the developers well versed with that kind of technology or the software? And there are a lot of other things as to how to build it or how to test it. So all the technical aspects are covered in the technical spike. And functional aspect is like what needs to be built. First of all, we do not have the clarity as to what is to be built. Even before knowing what technology to use, what software to use, we should be understanding as to what is the exact requirement. Basically, what is the design which is needed, what is the architecture which is needed, how it should be, visually seen, what is the expectation from the client. Like, it is mainly with the functionality aspect and not related to, the core coding concept. So if I'm trying to, tell one of my if I'm a client for a particular organization and I say that I want you to build a web page for me, and that web page should look like this, and the web page should comprise of these many things. And what are the other requirements? What I need over there? Maybe I need some banners or the flyers or whatever is the requirement. Those all comes with the functionality aspect. What needs to be built? So for this, mainly the interactions or the meetings with the stakeholders takes a primary role, and on the technical aspect, it would be more of the technical research what we need to do. Even on the functional aspect, there is some kind of research activity which we take place in order to understand if something similar is built in the past, if we can use that as a reference, or is there something already available which can be actually enhanced and done better. So these kind of aspects come in the functional front. So spike types are like technical and functional major, and based on that, we will have various other kind of spikes which can be a subpart of all of these. Like as I said, the design spike or architectural spike or some other kind of challenges. Again, main thing is doing some small research and coming to a common understanding what is to be done, how it is to be solved, and how to take this forward. So these are the few of the important aspects under the user story, acceptance criteria, spike, gather requirements gathering, and related to mainly the internal aspects of the sprint on which the team works upon. So I hope you people enjoyed this, and we'll catch you again during the next class. Thank you all.